300 kilometers, that's all that separates the Pacific Ocean from the Atlantic across the narrowest point in Mexico. 300 kilometers of jungle, limestone, and a century-old dream that every president since Porfirio Diaz has tried and failed to turn into reality. Until now. Right now, as you're watching this, Mexico is in the middle of the most ambitious infrastructure explosion in the Western Hemisphere. We're talking about a drought-proof alternative to the Panama Canal that can move a container ship's cargo from one ocean to the other in 9 hours. A 1,500-kilometer railway that loops the entire Yucatán Peninsula, built on top of a honeycomb of underground rivers. A brand new international airport with the longest runways in the country. And a nearshoring tidal wave that is pulling tens of billions of dollars out of China and pouring it straight into Mexican soil. This isn't one project. This is a coordinated $323 billion bet that Mexico can become the world's 10th largest economy by the end of this decade. And the engineering behind it is unlike anything we've ever seen attempted at this scale. Let's break down everything. The corridor, a dream older than the Panama Canal. To understand why the Interoceanic Corridor of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec matters, you need to rewind to 1907. Under the presidency of Porfirio Diaz, Mexico actually completed a trans-isthmus railway connecting the Pacific to the Gulf of Mexico, with the exact same goal of challenging traditional shipping routes. For a brief window, it worked. Cargo moved across Mexican land instead of sailing thousands of miles around South America. Then in 1914, the Panama Canal opened, and overnight that Mexican railway became irrelevant. The Mexican Revolution made things worse and the route collapsed into economic obscurity. For over 100 years, every attempt to revive it was killed by a lack of funding, a lack of political will, or both. Fast forward to 2023 and 2024. The Panama Canal is in crisis. El Niño-driven droughts have drained Gatun Lake to record lows, forcing ship restrictions that created delays of up to 20 days. Container ships were paying millions of dollars just to skip the queue. Global supply chains started looking for alternatives, and Mexico raised its hand. The Interoceanic Corridor, known as the CIIT, is that alternative. And as of March 2026, it's not a concept anymore. It's operational, engineering the new trade route. Here's how the numbers break down. The core of the system is the rehabilitated Tehuantepec Railway, 303 kilometers of track connecting the port of Salina Cruz on the Pacific side to the port of Coatzacoalcos on the Gulf. The primary freight line, Line Z, is fully operational. Engineers reinforced 82 railway bridges and completed 290 drainage projects just to handle heavy container loads. A second line extends to Palenque, connecting to the Tren Maya network. And the final segment, Line K, stretches 459 kilometers to the Guatemala border, sitting at 87.7% completion with a June 2026 deadline. Now the ports are where things get truly staggering. Salina Cruz has expanded from 150 hectares to over 6,000 hectares, a 40-fold increase. A new container terminal is being built with a 20-meter draft, meaning Salina Cruz will service ultra-large container vessels carrying over 18,000 TEUs. The biggest ships on the planet pulling into a port that 5 years ago barely handled oil tankers. So here's the comparison that matters. The Panama Canal handles about 8 million TEUs a year. The CIIT is targeting 1.4 million by 2033. It's not replacing the canal. It's a strategic relief valve, a drought-resistant backup for North American supply chains. And the transit time? A pilot project by Hyundai Glovis moved 900 vehicles from the Pacific to the Gulf Coast. The rail journey took 9 hours. For full logistics, unloading, rail, reloading, the total is benchmarked at 72 hours. Compare that to 15 to 20 days when the Panama Canal hits a drought backlog. That's not an incremental improvement. That's a completely different category. The money machine, industrial corridors and tax havens. But the Interoceanic Corridor isn't just a transit line, and this is the part most people miss. Along the route, the government established 14 industrial development hubs. 9 are already operational, targeting automotive, agro-industrial, and pharmaceutical manufacturing. The tax incentives are staggering. 100% income tax exemption for the first 3 years. 50 to 90% reduction for years 4 through 6. Complete VAT exemption. Accelerated depreciation up to 89%. The goal? 1.5 million new jobs by 2030 and a place in the world's top 10 economies. During ramp-up alone, the corridor has moved nearly 900,000 tons of cargo. The entire operation is secured by the Mexican Navy with 2,400 personnel across 4 states. It's drawn praise for efficiency and criticism for lack of transparency, and indigenous communities have challenged the project in court, arguing it bypassed environmental impact assessments. The government's response? Classify it as national security and keep building. Mid-roll CTA. If you're finding this breakdown valuable, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. This is the kind of deep dive engineering content we cover every single week. The mega projects and breakthroughs that are quietly reshaping the world while most people aren't paying attention. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The Tren Maya, engineering on a honeycomb. Now let's talk about the project that might be the most controversial piece of infrastructure Mexico has ever built. The Tren Maya, the Mayan train, is a 1,554-kilometer railway that loops the entire Yucatán Peninsula, 34 stations across 5 states, connecting Cancun and the tourist coast with remote archaeological sites and some of the poorest communities in the country. It was declared fully operational in December 2024. In 2025, ridership hit 1.3 million passengers, a 92% increase over the previous year, and the government's target is 4 million annually by 2030, with the 2026 World Cup expected to provide a massive tourism surge. But here's where the engineering story gets intense. The Yucatán Peninsula is not normal ground. Beneath the surface is a karst landscape, porous limestone riddled with caves, underground rivers, and cenotes. It's essentially a honeycomb of water-filled chambers holding up a thin crust of rock. Building a heavy rail system on top of this is one of the most technically audacious decisions in modern infrastructure. In Section 5 of the route, engineers built elevated viaducts to avoid direct ground impact. That required driving over 15,000 massive steel and concrete pillars directly into the limestone. Biologists have documented the destruction of at least 120 cenotes where those pillars punched through cave ceilings. In early 2025, Mexico's Secretary of the Environment publicly acknowledged damage to at least 8 caverns, the first time a government official admitted it. The deforestation numbers are equally staggering. The project cleared approximately 6,385 hectares of rainforest and deciduous forest. Environmental groups like Selva del Tren warn that pollutants from the construction threaten the Mesoamerican reef and the region's drinking water supply. UNESCO has formally expressed what it called utmost concern over the impact on the ancient Maya city and protected tropical forests of Calakmul, a World Heritage Site. Section 7 of the train and a new hotel were completed within the site boundaries without the strategic environmental assessments that UNESCO had requested. Meanwhile, Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History conducted what they describe as an unprecedented scientific rescue, cataloging over 871,000 archaeological artifacts. But critics allege that tens of thousands of other artifacts and smaller temple structures were bulldozed during rapid construction phases to avoid delays. And then there's the financial picture. The Tren Maya was originally projected to cost $7.5 billion. The final price tag? Somewhere between 28 and 30 billion. In the first half of 2025 alone, the train reported accumulated losses of 5.8 billion pesos, roughly $312 million, because operational costs are outstripping ticket sales. The daily ridership average is hovering around 2,000 passengers on a system designed for tens of thousands. So you've got a railway that cost 4 times its budget, is running at a fraction of capacity, and was built by driving thousands of pillars through one of the most ecologically sensitive landscapes on the planet. The engineering is undeniably impressive. Whether the trade-offs were worth it is a question Mexico will be answering for decades. AIFA, the airport they said would fail. Now let's shift to something that surprised almost everyone. The Felipe Ángeles International Airport, AIFA, was built on a former military base as a rapid alternative after the previous president canceled the $13 billion Texcoco airport. When it opened in 2022, critics called it a ghost airport in the middle of nowhere. 4 years later, 7 million passengers in 2025, targeting 9 million in 2026 with World Cup traffic. But the real transformation was cargo. When the government mandated all dedicated freight flights move from the saturated Mexico City International Airport, AIFA became a logistics powerhouse. Over 1 million metric tons of goods moved, with 49 cargo airlines now operating out of the facility. The airport features the longest runways in Mexico at 4,500 meters, Category 3B landing systems for near-zero visibility operations, and reached financial break-even in 2025. The biggest challenge remains connectivity to downtown Mexico City, though a new 57-kilometer rail line to Pachuca has been funded in the 2026 budget. The nearshoring tidal wave, pulling billions out of China. All of these projects, the corridor, the train, the airport, exist within a much larger economic story, and that story is nearshoring. As global corporations pull manufacturing out of China to shorten supply chains and reduce geopolitical exposure, Mexico has become the #1 destination. In the first half of 2025 alone, foreign direct investment in Mexico hit $34.3 billion, a 10% increase year over year. Foxconn, the company that builds your iPhone, has designated Mexico as its regional manufacturing platform for the Americas. They announced a $168 million investment in 2025 specifically for AI server production, on top of $241 million the year before. Foxconn now operates 14 plants across 9 Mexican cities, including a superchip complex in Guadalajara. Speaking of Guadalajara, Jalisco has emerged as Mexico's Silicon Valley, capturing 70% of the country's semiconductor establishments. The Sheinbaum administration launched a national semiconductor master plan and opened the Kutsari Design Center in early 2025. Mexico isn't just assembling chips anymore, it's moving into high-end design. And then there's the ghost everyone keeps talking about, the Tesla Gigafactory. Announced in 2023 as a $10 billion mega plant in Nuevo León, potentially the world's largest electric vehicle factory, the project is officially on hold as of 2026. Elon Musk paused construction over concerns about tariffs on Mexican-made vehicles following the US election. But even on hold, the so-called Tesla effect has already drawn over 30 suppliers to the state. Nuevo León's government has continued building roads, water treatment facilities, and highways with $135 million in incentives originally earmarked for the factory. Beyond the headlines, Mexico is pouring billions into what you might call connectivity tissue. A $3 billion plan Michoacán to modernize the port of Lázaro Cárdenas. A new 169-kilometer highway in Oaxaca cutting travel time from 6 hours to 2, and the Nuevo Manzanillo project, a massive port expansion designed to reach 10 million TEUs annually, 4 times the current capacity, featuring a 20-meter draft. If that gets built, it becomes the largest port complex in Latin America. The bigger picture, and the risks nobody wants to talk about. So let's zoom out. Under President Claudia Sheinbaum, Mexico has launched Plan Mexico, a $323.4 billion investment strategy running through 2030. 54% of that goes to energy, 16% to railways, 14% to highways. The goal is to keep public investment locked at around 2% of GDP and ride the nearshoring wave to become a top 10 global economy. The geopolitical logic is clear. Mexico is positioning itself as the indispensable manufacturing partner for the United States at the exact moment America is decoupling from China. The 2026 USMCA joint review is the critical junction. The outcome of that renewal decision will determine whether the cross-border supply chains these mega projects were built to support actually have a long-term future. But there are real risks that could unravel all of it. In February 2026, the killing of a major cartel leader triggered retaliatory violence across 28 states. Logistics corridors were hit with road blockades and arson attacks. Businesses in Mexico now spend over 8% of their operational budgets on private security. Organized crime remains the single largest threat to the infrastructure dream. Fiscally, the government is running a 4.3% deficit, and total infrastructure spending as a percentage of GDP has actually declined from a 2014 high. The gap between ambition and funding is being bridged by a model that tries to attract private capital while keeping state ownership of key assets, a delicate balance that not everyone believes is sustainable. And then there are the environmental and cultural costs that are already locked in. Destroyed cenotes, bulldozed forests, displaced communities, archaeological sites buried under concrete. Those aren't reversible. What Mexico is attempting right now is one of the most aggressive infrastructure transformations of the 21st century. A drought-proof ocean crossing, a railway through underground rivers, semiconductor design centers where assembly plants used to be, ports being expanded for the biggest ships ever built. All of it racing against fiscal clocks, political cycles, and the looming question of whether the USMCA framework will survive. Whether Mexico actually vaults into the top 10 depends on forces no amount of concrete and steel can control. But the scale of what's being built right now is unlike anything this hemisphere has seen in decades. If you made it this far, you already know this channel is where we go deep on the engineering and mega projects that are reshaping the global landscape. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and I'll see you in the next one.